Hello, I am Dr. Chris Parker and welcome to week 2 of Usability Principles and Practice. This is part 2 of the series on expert evaluation and we're focusing today on accessibility. Now, if you haven't seen part 1, I really recommend you go back, watch part 1 and then come over to here in part 2. We'll be referring to a few things that happened the previous time, so it's just good to have along. I'll put the link in the description below to make things nice and simple. So what we're talking about with accessibility, we're looking at recognizing the role heuristics play in identifying usability issues to influence the redesign of websites. But in particular, we're looking at WCAG 2.1's heuristics for accessibility evaluation. Now, if you don't know what that is, do not worry, we will be covering that in detail, so you will know everything you need to know. So before we go into that, we've got to think about what is accessibility. Now, people use assistive web technologies to overcome disabilities. Now, this could be using a keyboard instead of a mouse, changing browser settings, screen readers, screen magnifiers, etc. And at this time, it's very difficult to say who these people are. People have really diverse needs, but suffice to say, if you have a vision impairment, you might use a screen reader. If you have a hearing disability, you might use closed captions. If you have Parkinson's, you may use voice control rather than mouse control, etc. Now, to help you understand this fully, I've got a quick video to show you. Now, this video is Creative Commons. It was created by the Windows community, so I'm showing it to you here partly as part of fair use, well, fully as part of fair use, but also because it's very important you see this. So I really hope that you find great insight into the design of systems for people with accessibility issues. So please check it out and enjoy. Okay, so I hope that brought a great insight into just how well Microsoft is doing it. As I recommend, go and have a look at their videos. They're absolutely fantastic. So how do we think about accessibility if we're not Microsoft? This is where we bring in WCAG 2.0. Actually, it's not 2.0. We're one beyond that. We are in 2.1. Slight evolution. Now, this stands for Web Content Accessibility Guidelines, and we're in the first revision of the second version of this. Don't need to worry about that. All you need to worry about is that there's 3 levels of compliance. So when you look at the guidelines, you'll see either A, AA, or AAA next to requirements. So when you build your first high-fidelity prototype, you want to comply with everything which has an A next to it. When you get into your beta testing, you want to have AA level. And then when you release your product out in the market, you want full compliance with every part of the list. Why do you do this? Now, you could start with full compliance, and that is a very good thing if you really want your software accessible. But it can be a bit over the top and a lot of work to do in the fast moving area of high fidelity prototyping. Having simple compliance in at the very start means that features are evolved and they are iterated and they're tested with accessibility in mind. So accessibility is not something you try and shove in at the end if you can. If you leave accessibility to the very end of your design, it is unlikely you will be able to make it all fit. So let's go into more details about WCAG. So according to the UK government, the Web Content Accessibility Guidelines are an internationally recognised set of recommendations for improving web accessibility. They explain how to make digital services, websites and apps accessible to everyone, including users with impairments to their vision, hearing, mobility, or thinking and understanding. Now, thing to remember on this is that most disabilities are invisible. A large amount of people in the population have dyslexia or other learning disabilities. This can affect items such as the number of items you can keep in mind at one moment. It can affect your ability to tell time or read numbers, etc. So just because you can't see someone's disability doesn't mean they don't have one or won't develop one in the future. There are 4 design principles in the WCAG guidelines. These are perceivable design, operational design, understandable design, and robust design. We're now going to go through each of these 4 areas in detail. So if you're perceivable, then you are providing text alternatives for any non-content. You are providing alternatives to time-based media. You're creating content that can be presented in different ways, and you're making it easier for users to see and hear content. You've really got, all you have to do is go through these 4 sections and saying, yep, I am doing this. WCAG does provide specific guidelines on each of these ones individually. I highly recommend that you go and have a look at them and read. This is just a quick overview. So providing text alternatives, what do we mean? So do your controls have names, or are they just images? So on the right, you've got the music icon with an emoji, or just music, and they're both fine, but when you write music, it means that it's more usable for assistive software or certain users. Catchers, we see these all over the place, so click the number of crossroads before you can go and enter this website or sign up. That's great, but not if you're visually impaired or have a problem using a mouse to select an image. So saying solve a maths problem or doing something else is an alternative way to that, or typing in what the capture says. Now, if you've got key information being given by video or audio, then that's not very good if your user is deaf or blind. So having a text description. So the example they give is you've got a flute performance. Don't know why I wrote fruit, probably around lunchtime, but you got a flute performance happening on a website. Have audio descriptive. Describe the event. Describe there. Let the person either hear someone talking about what's there and what they see before they hear the music to give the full context of the sound, or maybe have a written dialogue which has the same description, but then a description of the sound. And there's a whole area around this. Won't go into it here, but give alternatives. When you look at the BBC News website, we will see this a lot. The videos always have captions available, and they always have text for you to read, making it inclusive. So what is time-based media? So you've got to think about time-based media, providing captions on pre-recorded media, providing transcripts, providing sign language on videos if possible, and audio descriptive voiceover. This is YouTube, my last video that I posted, and you'll see that YouTube has automatically transcribed my voice. So you can see I am Dr. Chris Parker. I didn't tell it to do that. It just generated it automatically, meaning people can click on the options down the bottom there. They can say, hey, I want this quality, I want this language, I want to see the captions on here, and I want to read it. So YouTube is very good for time-based media, and video is time-based media. Adaptive content means that when you present text, it's in a meaningful sequence. There's not an arrow saying, hey, look over there. You just read it with a clear flow. Your operating system is instructed to understand what's going on. So you'll have text descriptions, not just color, not just shape, not just size, orientation, or sound. You really let any assistive technologies work out what's going on the page by the words you use, such as headings. Introduction and conclusion are 2 common headings. Use them. Don't try and be smart. Lots of different people use screens in different ways, so make sure your content is viewable at different screen orientations. Overall, it's making your assistive technology be able to identify anything that goes on the page. On that note, we've got to make everything easy to understand if you're looking at the screen. If you have a visual impairment, low contrast ratios are difficult to tell the difference between. So this is website for contrast checker. You can see the URL at the top there. You generally have to have all text and images with a contrast ratio of 4.5 to 1. Now I see that the 2 colors I've selected have 4.98 to 1, which means that I am WCAG AA, intermediate passes, but to get that full AAA pass, it doesn't work. So I can use these colors for a title, which only needs 3:1 ratio. Incidental text or logos don't matter. But if I want to use this color as my text, my main text color, it's inappropriate. So just by playing with the sliders on there, we can change the contrast ratio and then we can see if we're compliant. Part 2, operable. So what do we mean by being operable? If your website or system makes all functions available from a keyboard, provides users enough time to read and use content, if you design content in a way that is known to cause seizures, you won't get through this, so do not design that way, and provide ways to help users navigate content. So let's go into that. So quite simply, when you're programming your interface, make sure everything can be controlled via a keyboard in some way. So shortcuts are the most classic one. We all use them, and there's a lot more than you're aware of because of accessibility issues. But you got to make sure that you work with the operating system's accessibility features, meaning that you can map areas to the keyboard. If you have very complex software, such as I think some statistical packages, maybe some CAD systems for computer-aided design, it can be challenging to do that. So thinking about keyboard mapping from the very start is very important. Web pages, a bit less so because the OS and the browser have this built in, but it is nonetheless important. Now, removing time restrictions. So when things happen on the website, so they move, they blink, text scrolls, information scrolls, it's time restricted, meaning that you have to watch it at a certain period in order to understand it. Now, BBC News website here, you've got a video on the front page and the user chooses when to play it. They can play it, they can pause it, they can hide it if they really want. So the user has control over content that is time restricted. Now, I'm not going to show you videos for this because I was thinking of examples and I just thought maybe I could cause a seizure by mistake. So there's no images here, but the real basic rule is if you have anything flashing 3 times in a row with less than 1 second between cycles of flashing, so 1, 2, 3, 1, 2, 3, 1, 2, 3, 1, 2, 3, really fast, that can cause a seizure. So do not do that. You can have animations on your website or system, but make sure that users can disable them so that rather than triggering interaction, triggering animation through clicking on a page or being somewhere, the user can turn it off, and if they're susceptible, then the seizure is avoided. That one is very important. Back on to the thing about seizures, lots of people, the hidden disabilities, epilepsy is a hidden disability, and this is the kind of thing that can cause that. So, a side note. So, helpful navigation. Now, this is going into general usability rules. We'll cover this in a few weeks' time when we have a podcast completely about navigation. But the basic gist is all web pages have titles, all links are clear. You don't have to wonder what the link does. The writing tells you exactly what it is. You can locate web pages in many ways. So, for example, I can click on a front article. There's navigation at the top. I can get to it. You can't see it here. There's a search box, but I can get to it in many ways. Importantly, the headings and labels describe the content, topic, and purpose. So, it is just good practice. You must design your content to be understandable. So make text content readable and understandable. Make web pages appear and operate in predictable ways. Help users avoid and correct mistakes. So making text readable and understandable. Now this is more about the programming of the site or software than it is anything else. So you don't have to worry too much about this. But an idea you can see here is I visit a Chinese webpage whilst using Google Chrome, and Chrome says, hey, do you want me to translate this? Because the website has been developed in a way that the browser which is Chrome, can go, that's a heading, that's this, you mean this. So it translates it. Now, you can go deeper by making sure any unusual words can be identified and defined. So if you're a Harry Potter fan and you're writing a Harry Potter website, you're going to have lots of very unusual words. So working on that. And abbreviations can be identified or defined. In practice, this could be something as simple as when you see a strange word or an abbreviation, hovering over the word with your mouse will bring up the definition to make it clearer. That's just one way, but it works well. Also, use simple language. Now, you might be a master's student, might be a PhD graduate, who knows, but your reader probably won't be. If they've got a hidden disability such as dyslexia, their reading ability may be compromised to a certain degree. So if you end up going for only using words that you would find at a lower secondary school reading level, lower high school reading level, then you're in a good place. So around a 16-year-old's vocabulary. So you can search online, find lots of information about how you use vocabulary of a 16-year-old. Pro Writing Aid has a built-in function if you use that editor. There's a link in the description below. But bear in mind, don't try and be too smart. Back onto BBC News, which is a great example of a usable interface, actually an accessible interface. So make web pages appear and operate in a very predictable way, which is I do something on one page, on a different part of the site, the same rules apply. You don't have, click here, press this button, do things on one page, and then on a different page, the same actions do a different outcome. You might think that sounds strange. Why would you ever do that? But I've seen this. There's very famous CAD software called Lectra, which is used for designing clothes. Probably most of the clothes you wear were designed using Lectra. Shift S does one thing on one part of the software, go to a different function on there, so you're looking at patterns of cloth or whatever. Shift S does something utterly different. It's mind-boggling. You've got to know the system rather than learn it. It's absolutely insane. Anyway, be consistent. Set yourself rules at the start and always follow them. If your rules don't work in one part of the web page, change your rules to make them work over the entire thing. And the last part of this design rule is helping users avoid and correct mistakes. So this is back to our basic heuristics of usability, which we covered in the previous video. Remember, if you haven't seen that, go back and watch that video. So when errors occur, users are notified. So here's an example. The user has put the wrong password into the login form, and MailChimp has said, sorry, that password isn't right. We can help you recover your password. That's great. So you're supporting them when they make mistakes. You have clear labels saying, this is your username, this is your password. It's not letting you guess. If you have a system saying, we only let you put the right data in. So if your username was an email address, then if you type anything without the @ symbol or a non-valid email address, it can flag and say, hey, sorry, it looks like you're entering the wrong name. Enter your email address. So you're correcting the right path. And of course, let people undo actions. And finally, we go into the last area, which is actually the easiest one, robustness. You want to maximize compatibility with current and future user agents. Now, I've talked quite a bit about assistive technologies in Windows or Mac. That is great. You don't need to worry about this as a UX designer. As a coder, developer, and programmer, you do need to worry about this. There's specific things you need to do, but the important thing is when you have a meeting about the design and development of your software or your website or whatever it is, you speak to the developer about WCAG 2.1 and say you must make sure that this system is compatible with every current and, coming up soon, assistive technology and user agent there is. Definitely everything on Windows, definitely everything on Mac software, etc. Try and predict the future, and if new stuff comes out, you work with it. So that is a very quick overview of the WCAG 1 guidelines. 2.1. So I'm going to link in the description below about the guidelines, lots of other things. So check out the guideline. You'll see fuller descriptions and just spend time getting to know it. It's such an important and robust system. If you like this video and all the content we're making, then please remember to like, comment and subscribe. And coming up next week, we have biometrics. So using eye tracking, using pulse ratings and all that amazing stuff to infer usability. I've been Dr. Chris Parker. Thanks a lot.